your time spent with whether it's the accounting manager, the CFO, whoever it might be, should be focused on discovery. You got to be focused on discovery.
So, Patty, today we had Lynn Katz on. Of course, Lynn sells large B2B merchants and also is part of Rich Norton Super Crew and has a team. So I thought he's a very interesting kind of right on the front lines, but also very interesting insights on B2B and how to sell those merchant accounts.
Well, yeah, and I really like the fact that he comes from the corporate world to this
Right.
world, which gives him a whole different perspective on how to sell B2B. And I think our listeners are going to be interested in the fact that he does have a slightly different
Sure.
take on this.
Yeah. So and then of course right after that, we have Rich Norton sharing some sales tips as well, and so kind of a lot of Rich Norton Super Crew today. And I do want to mention as well here that Rich Norton and kind of his organization, they do also sponsor CC Sales Pro, so that is a one of those paid sponsorships. Now Lynn Katz is just somebody that I found through the relationship with Rich, and I thought it was a fantastic
Right.
interview. But I do always like to mention when somebody's on here that's a paid sponsor. And then talk to us a little bit about Patty about the insiders, which I thought was super interesting as well.
Yeah, it's about states trying to regulate interchange, and in particular, there's an Illinois law that's left unchecked could really upend things starting next July.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Very interesting.
our episode, of course, is brought to you by Nativia, nativia.com to learn all you want about Nativia banking.
Awesome. Good stuff. With that being said, let's dive into our interview.
Let's do it.
Hey, everybody. Patty and I are here today with Len Katz. How you doing today, Len?
Good, doing real well. Good morning or good afternoon. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you. So we've had, of course, Rich Norton on the podcast. Often he does a little segment, and so Rich and I were talking recently about how his what he calls his super crew. We have
Yeah.
these different leaders that have had a lot of kind of experience in the industry or specialized things. I know, Len, you've had kind of a meteoric rise in the payments industry, starting I think just about 3 years ago, and then selling some big accounts now. And so we're going to talk about selling these large B2B accounts. But I thought before we would dive into that, maybe you could share a little bit of your story. How did you end up in this crazy industry, and how did you end up working with Rich Norton?
No, it's a great question. So my background really quickly is manufacturing, mostly C-suite, vice president roles. And I was in a large manufacturing company for several years, almost 14 years. And I was getting towards the end of my, I say, real passion for the role.
Right.
And when you're in a leadership role, if you don't have passion for it, you're doing a disservice to the people you serve and the people you lead. So I went to the board and said, I think I'm going to step away. I don't know where I'm going. I knew the people who started Payrock from when I got out of college. I thought I'd reach out. What is this industry about?
Right.
And really, that's where the exploration began. I just asked a few questions, thinking really I would get a job there. And they said, no, no, no. You want to be on your own. That's where you want to be. And that's how it all started.
That's great. So Lynn, when
That's
you
cool.
when you jumped in, which again I know was I think about was it 3 years ago or roughly? Is that right?
It'll be 3 years ago, January 2nd of 2025.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. So when you first got in, of course,
Wow.
you had this background and everything about on the B2B side, but I
Yeah.
kind of doubt that you started off selling big B2B merchant accounts. So talk about what was the strategy when you first got in and to the business, and what was your kind of early signs that hey, this might be a good fit?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So you're right. I didn't jump right into B2B because they're highly complex. They take a long time to close.
Right.
And I always say the enemy of every sale is time. So the longer something takes to close, the more risk it's not going to.
Right.
And jumping from a nice salaried bonus position into the world of I eat what I kill, my thought was I can't go into B2B for two reasons. One, I really don't know what it entails in terms of the payment industry. And number two, I don't have time to learn. So my strategy was this. I was going to start with small, easy to close accounts. And those are the ones that are owner present type accounts. Build a nice foundation of residuals on that, and then slowly work my way up into the B2B when I had time and I had enough residuals to go, okay, I'm okay, I'm surviving, and my wife and I are putting stuff away in savings, and all the bills are getting paid, so now I can have time to go after those large accounts. That was the basic strategy.
Hmm. So what point did you transition then? I mean, and how did you do this? Did you stop selling simple accounts completely,
Yeah.
or was it a gradual transition?
So that's a great question, Patty. I'm going to step back a little bit before I go into that transition, right? when I started going into what we're doing now, I focused on my warm list and I focused again on those small businesses. And my goal was to close one deal a week to understand what this sales process looked like. On the January 28th, I think it was, of my first month doing it, I closed my fifth deal, and it was a cold call, but the other 3 to 4 were more warm list, right? So I got that down. I said, okay, well, if I can do one a week, I should be able to do 2 a week. What I'm looking for here is a pattern, a rhythm that I could feel that was existed. Right. So in February, 4 weeks in that month, went for 2 a week, got it. And I thought, okay, I see the rhythm. I see the game. And then for the next 6 to 7 months, I was doing about 15 deals a month, all in the owner present world, right? They're there. Right. Then I didn't jump right into B2B. I then eased into point of sale, where a little more complexity, a little more time sensitive. I went after easy ones, the easy point of sales, the Clover type deals, stuff that's plug and play, and a few other products we have, and was able to secure those. It took about, I would say it took about a year and a half to get to where I felt, okay, I've got a solid foundation of residuals and customers that I trust and can maintain. Even with some attrition, I should be okay. So at that point, about a year and a half in, I started to split my time half between going out in the field and knocking on doors, and the other half leveraging my network from before.
And in terms of leveraging your network, you're talking about that was your B2B, sort of your B2B client? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Coming from where I came from, I had a lot of contact with bankers.
That's what I would expect. Sure.
Yeah. Accounting firms, things of that nature, as well as the company I used to work at. I went back to them as well, So all that opportunity. Yeah.
So I guess then the way you found your B2B deals was, some prospecting, some networking, and some sort of reaching back into your previous life. Was that?
Yes, correct.
Fair assessment?
Yeah, and it was an interesting journey. I had to re-educate people who I was. They all knew me from my previous life. Right. Many years in there, and being the person that everybody reached out to in that industry, I had to say I hadn't made a change, but that created a great opportunity for a conversation begun.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so Lynn, when you're reaching out to these B2B folks, right? Well, I guess let me follow up on that question first. I mean, okay, so for the person who maybe wants to sell B2B and they don't have your background, right? So maybe they have some B2B background, but they maybe don't have that network, right? So I'm assuming at some point you kind of run out of these room, right? How do you actually prospect for B2B? Is there a way that you just find B2B prospects you didn't know existed?
Well, as we know in this industry, we always stumble across something, right? Right. At the exceptions to the rules. So I'm not going to speak to that, where you just might know a CFO.
Right.
But just like the sales process in B2B can be longer, so can the prospecting process. Yeah. It involves a lot of trust. So places I'm now prospecting outside of my warm list is I'll join a chamber, of course. And here's the thing about a chamber. People think you join a chamber and you go to chamber meetings and the doors of industry are wide open. That's not how it works.
Right.
How it works. You really need to go approach the people in the chamber, but your common ground is we're in the chamber together. Yeah. Right. And the way I started, I'll just tell you, I would say, hey, I recently joined the chamber. You're in it as well. And I'm out trying to schedule meetings with other chamber members to see if we could do business together. And that just led to the question, well, what is it that you do? And then I said, well, I'm in the payment processing sector, focusing on B2B, helping make their process more efficient and easier to use within their organization.
So that's great. That's actually a great lead into my next question, which is when you do have that initial interaction, right? When we think about payments, right, is it primarily savings that you're trying to get the hook with, or is it about efficiency? Is it about cash flow? I mean, there's all these different angles with B2B. How do you approach that from these big B2B accounts?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest mistake agents make when they start doing B2B. It's not about savings. It's not about savings. I'll use the place I used to work at. You move in hundreds of millions of dollars a month. And, while their processing costs for ACH and things of that nature are high by our standards, they're me going, hey, I'm going to save you money. I'm going to save you, $10,000 a month on processing, but you got to change everything. That doesn't get their attention. Right. That actually pushes me away. Yeah. So it really starts out, there's a couple of things B2B is looking for. Number one is, can we make what we do to collect money easier, so more efficiently among our stakeholders, that the accounting departments, anybody who's got to do that, as well as our customers? How do we make that easy and simple? The rule number one of business is don't ever get in the way of your customers spending money with you.
Right.
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 You want to make sure they can. So we look at that. Then secondly is security. How secure will it be? Right.
Sure.
One transaction could be several $100,000. Right. So it's got to
Right.
move very quickly, easy, can't be held up. Now, they're not looking for next day deposits like your mom and pop stores, right? I got to have my money the next day. But they understand there will be some time, and they're willing to give up that time for security, right? Down at the bottom end is savings. But I'll share something that people need to know is, if you can do those two things really well, you can actually charge them more than what they're paying now to get it.
Yeah.
So the goal of the CFO is a lot different than the goal of a brick and mortar store.
Yeah, that's really intriguing, because a lot of other people that we've talked to about B2B, it's always the savings. It's always like, but then, like you say, you have to change so many other processes to achieve those savings that has to like fly in the face of any CFO's common wisdom, right?
That's correct. So one of the big things in most large organizations is ERP software, which is enterprise resource planning, right? And that just makes sure all the different departments can talk to each other within an organization, right? That's the hub. Right. That's the hub. You eventually have to get into that hub. And if you disrupt that communication, they don't want anything to do with it. And coming from the other side of that desk, where people would come in and try to get our business, I've been in the closed door meeting. I know the questions that are asked. The savings one, it is asked, but usually at the end. And if we can do something better and it costs more money, we would look at it and go, all right, well, what's the opportunity gained by spending more money?
Right.
And then we make
when you spoke there, and actually, and James, if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of go out of order here, because you talked about ERP. I mean, what role does software integration play with this B2B strategy? I mean, do you have to work with ERP systems, or do you start with a virtual terminal? How does that go?
Well, again, depending on the size of the organization, right? I've got a team member about a couple of months ago was able to get into a large propane provider, right? And they didn't have a robust ERP. They had a light one, and he was able to bring a virtual terminal to that relationship. Now, we know that eventually that business is continuing to grow, and eventually an ERP provider is going to come in. So we want to be ahead of that, almost suggest an ERP system that can work with us, that we can integrate with to help them solve that, rather than wait for an outside ERP to come in with their own non-agnostic processing system, and then we lose that business because it's significant. Right. So I hope that answers your question. You got to look at each one. And if you don't mind, Patty and James, this is really where the sales process changes drastically. Your time spent with, whether it's the accounting manager, the CFO, whoever it might be, should be focused on discovery. You got to be focused on discovery. One of the questions I'll ask is, pretend I'm an invoice. What's my life cycle? Right? Where do I start, and how do I get put to bed? Right? Where do I live throughout the process? And just take notes, actively listen, pay attention to what's happening between the lines, dig in. If you're an agent that has the background of coming from, the other side of the desk like you'll know intuitively what questions need to be asked. It can be a little harder if you've never lived in that, but that should not discourage you. Still go after it, still dig into it, and just be actively listening.
So it sounds like, Len, what you're saying here is, we want to approach the B2B company as, hey, we're a payments expert, and we're really good at making the payments process more efficient, streamlining cash flow. We even can offer little savings along the way, potentially, depending on your setup. But the first step is, we need to understand more about what you do. How does an invoice work from beginning to end? Is that what you're saying is kind of the approach?
That's correct. That's correct. I'll tell you one of the funniest things I found recently. We're working with this company. It's not closed yet. Their ERP software is very expensive and cumbersome. It doesn't work well with their accounting software, right? So they could do it, but when I say expensive, not the processing point, but to bring in more modules, as you will, into the ERP becomes expensive. So what this large company that has an average invoice of about $200,000 is doing, it's kind of crazy. They allow their customers to have access to their bank account for deposits only. And you know how you can deposit a check mobilely now with your phone?
Right.
That's
Right.
what they told. They're just like they gave a mobile deposit access.
Wow.
Wow.
And I'm like, these
Wow,
are
that blows my mind. I'm
yeah.
sorry, but
So, but even in that, now part of it, I'm like, I guess it's secure, but is this really how you want to operate this large company where people
Right.
have to, what is it? So my question to them is, what does it look like? I get it with your regular customers, but as you grow the business, what's that process like to give them access to do mobile deposits?
Right.
right,
Exactly.
because you're
Yeah.
giving
And
them
that's where
access to your account.
right.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's where the
crazy.
conversation is going to go. And I expect it to land with how easy can we get customers to start depositing with us or
Yeah.
ACH? And we all know the answer to that,
Mm.
but they've taken this weird cobbled way and here's our
Yeah.
account. Just download this app on your phone.
So, so Lynn, as we go through this, right? I mean, you've mentioned a lot of different people within a B2B organization, right? The accounting department, the
Yeah.
CFO, the CEO, et cetera. So when you're reaching out, and again, maybe you already have a connection, obviously that would dictate. But if you're just kind of like, hey, there's a company, I think it's an opportunity, I want to reach out. Who are you trying to get in contact with? Do you go straight for the CFO? Do you work your way up the ladder? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm thinking of that. Um, so my gut is I'm going to go for the CFO.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to go for the CFO. Now, if it's a large organization where the CFO is, it's a publicly traded one, that's going to be hard to get to. So I'm going to still go for the CFO, but I may have to start with an accounting manager first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's a little different based on their
The
enterprise
size.
level, how big they are.
Sure. And
Sure,
and
sure.
so once you have that initial reach out, talk to us a little bit about sales cycle time. I mean, again, I know this is going to vary a lot with the
Yeah.
technology solution and other variables like the size of the organization, but how long does this whole thing kind of typically take? What are your expectations?
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of variation. So I'm going to break this into typical, right? There's always
Yeah.
exceptions.
Yep. Sure.
Sure.
I don't ever expect any B2B deal to be shorter than 3 months,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then I move quick. I don't let things die on the vine.
Right.
You have to really manage. I don't know if you can see my whiteboard behind me. You have to manage where everything is, right?
Yes.
Now, I, of course, have a CRM and all that, but when I'm on the phone in my office, I'm writing on that board. Those are notes from my last meeting. That didn't happen too long ago. Just
Right.
quickly, and I'll transfer that. But you have to stay on top of it 3 months. Um, there are some most of them will close right after that, and there's some that can go up to a year because depending on the size, let's use your last example. If I go with the accounting manager first, they're
Right.
part of the decision. CFO is part of the decision, and eventually, in some cases, I haven't gotten there yet, but I know it's on the horizon. There's going to be a board decision that may need to happen. It's rare.
Sure.
The board typically doesn't get into that minutia, but if it's a large enough organization that's going to require a large capital investment on their part, investing in infrastructure, then the board will be involved in that.
Yep. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
those
So
will go out really far.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this has really been super interesting, Len. I've really enjoyed kind of just talking about B2B sales, I think in general. It's been a while. We used to have Roger McNamara on before he went to Visa. I'm sure we'll have him on again in the future. But yeah, I always find it so fascinating because I think that B2B is such a huge opportunity for the ISO space. I think that it's kind of
Yeah.
like there's some open field there, and we haven't done a very good job of going after it. But I do want to shift gears because I know this is what we've been talking about is kind of what you're personally doing to go out and build your
Yeah.
portfolio. But then I know also within Rich's organization, you have a team of your own of agents that come into the industry that are new to the industry or whatever. Maybe they're more experienced. They come in and they want to be successful.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that side of your business. How do you help these agents to be successful? And talk a little bit more about kind of, your kind of journey of getting into this idea of managing a team as well.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So, going back to what we talked about earlier, it took about a year and a half before I felt really stable.
Right.
And my background
Mhm.
is leading different teams as well. And I just enjoy that. I knew that going into this industry, there had to be a moment when I'd be working with others helping them reach their goals. It's just a lot of fun. So I reached out to Rich Norton and said, hey, I'd like to have a small team. So he gave me a small one to start with. And then I recruited a few people. It's not real big. held it tight. I want to really stick with that. But other than regular calls and all that stuff, one thing we do, and we did it this morning, every Monday morning, we do what's called a check-in call. And we have a motto in my team, and it's this: none of us are smarter than all of us together, right?
Right.
We're all independent agents, all 1099 people. We're all in our own states and our own communities working. But we get on the call and I go around the horn and I say, all right, it's the same question every week. How did last week go? What's your plan for this week? And how can we help? And each person takes the time to share. And at the end, another agent might say, hey, that's an interesting deal. Here's how I put that together. Or, hey, I'm on something like that. How'd you do this? And we share that knowledge. Outside of that call, and we celebrate. We're on that call. We're celebrating the wins. We never commiserate. That's one thing I won't allow. No commiserating. I'll mute you so quick if you same problem. No, we're not doing that. But we will encourage you when you're having a down day. Right? Come on, you can get through this. Let me take that offline. So we celebrate, we encourage, and we share knowledge. Outside of that, there's regular check-ins. We know we can call each other at any time. And then we use Discord as our channel of communication. And what we do is anytime somebody puts a deal in, because I have agents writing your brick and mortar deals, put in there what the deal was, highlights how much volume, type of business, and what program and product did you put in place, so everybody can see it. And maybe there's somebody else out in the field in the team. Oh, I'm about to walk in a place like that, right? And what your pricing was. So it's a real, again, none of us are smarter than all of us together, and it's a real joint effort to succeed. It's been fun. Now, my progression is Rich recently put together an executive team to help with the larger super crew, and he's asked me to sit on that with two other gentlemen. And that's been a lot of fun because now I get to interact with other leaders out there. And I got to give this one prop to one of these other leaders. He gave me another good saying. He said, this is the only industry. His name is Chris Griego. He's a leader out in the West. He said, this is the only industry that you can go out every day and give yourself a raise. And I love it. I'm like, yeah, that's the way to think, you know?
Right.
So my agents now, when they're out there, go, hey, I gave myself a raise today. I gave myself a raise. You know, it's just a great way to stay motivated. So
that's great, man. That's some really great stuff, Len. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I know that there's going to be folks out there that are going to want to learn more about how to work with you, your team. Where would you send them? Contact information, maybe,
Yeah.
So a special website, a special address. I don't know, but
yeah, I have a web address that will help people get connected to the Super Crew. It's TSC, stands for the Super Crew, TSCagent.com, TSCagent.com. Very simple little form fill. Let us know who you are, where you're located, and then you can put a comment in there if you want. And myself or one of the other executive team members, or even Rich Norton himself, he's been known to do it. We'll reach out to you and want to learn more about you, understand what you're trying to do, and see if we're a good fit to help you get where you're going. And I'm gonna give one little plug for that Super Crew, going back to when I first started. When I contacted the people at Payrock, like, hey, I want to do this, and they said, no, you're going to be an agent, and we're going to put you with this Super Crew. I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know who Rich Norton was. I know now who he is. I didn't know what that was. And I hopped on a plane and said, well, I'm going to visit this guy, Rich Norton. Flew down to Orlando, rode with him from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. and watched him write 3 deals. And I thought, holy cow. Now, in my head, I thought, well, this is simple. No, it's not. Right. If I didn't have the Super Crew, and I really tell people this all the time, I didn't know what it was when I signed up, but in hindsight, I don't know how I could have got where I am without the support that large organization brings with its training, its encouragement, the connectivity. I got to leave next week for one of our quarterly sales blitzes where 40 some agents will get together and encourage each other in the field, go out and do sales every day, and then come back and share war stories. I've never experienced anything like it. And I'm not saying you can't succeed without it. I just don't know how I could have done it without it. It was a real blessing in disguise to get connected with that, not knowing it was there.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, Len, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today and to share all of your insights, both about the B2B side of things, which is super interesting to me, and then also this thing with the Super Crew and how you're building the team there with Rich. So again, I think that was tscagent.com. So you guys can head over there to learn more about that. And Len, thank you so much for your time and joining us today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Vlad, it's no secret that Clover has been probably the most popular point of sale system ever in the ISO world. And yet, I hear a lot of complaints about Clover, figuring out installations and support and features and apps and all this stuff, all this complexity. So, I know this is something you're passionate about as well. So, I thought maybe this week on our announcement, tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing with Clover these days and maybe talk about Nativia Pro a little bit.
So we have an entire Clover strategy that we're rolling out into the 2025. And to start with, we want to make sure that we build a team that understands and take the time to really explore Clover the way that the Clover is out there today, so that anybody that has an ability to place a Clover device would feel that they get their installation support. I mean, let's face it, Clover will do everything else, but the installation support and the configurations and initial touch
Right.
is what makes the most difficult thing in the
Yeah.
in the agent business to get Clovers out there and make sure that it's all done correctly. So we created a channel and a company called Nativia Pro. What's Pro? Professionals. So we professionally do Clovers now. And as you probably heard from my previous announcements, I don't get people to head up some of these channels that we're now doing just to anybody and everybody. These are vetted people that work with me for ages and ages and ages and know how the Nativia works, first of all, and know their line of craft really, really, really well, so that you could literally, call and feel that you now know everything about it. If there is if there is a particular thing that needs to be done, and specifically for this case, we're talking about Clover. One of the biggest complaints in Clover um, uh, is actually apps. So we are heavily investing into creating partnerships with apps that are going to create a Clover experience completely different than any other ISO in the country. And we're partnering and getting, we know where to get Clover's first data contracts. So we're partnering and getting every first data contract there is to be in order to make sure that you have absolutely best Clover experience. And of course, trusted partners that work with me for years. It's Nativia Pro is headed by Giovanni DeFebo. He was my director of operations for 10 years. It was very hard for me to let it go, but I felt that the opportunity is required. He's heading our Nativia Pro. He's the COO of Nativia Pro, and you're definitely going to be in good hands. And obviously, we're going to talk about him more down the road.
Good stuff. So if you're out there right now and you're selling Clover and you want to check out a improved experience of, figuring out what Clover devices to place, actually getting them installed, all of that, and understanding also the app strategy that Vlad is doing, you can head over to nativia.com/CC Sales Pro, nativia.com/CC Sales Pro. Click on Nativia Pro and you can check it out there. Thanks, everybody. Hey everybody, back here with Rich Norton, who's sitting in his car as usual out in the field selling merchant services, but taking a little bit of a break in the action to share some insights with us today. How you doing today, Rich?
Doing excellent. And that's what we always believe in doing, leading by example. One thing I can say about our team is that we don't have people sitting behind the desk saying, back in my day, we're out in the field. So everything we're talking about is exactly what we're doing. And that, to me, that's, even though I have couple hundred representatives that we supervise around the country. My favorite part and the most challenging part, because I'm very competitive, is getting out in the field visiting merchants. So I love it.
Yeah, and I think I doubt anything has changed, Rich. Last time that I checked with kind of the Payrock leaderboard, I believe you were kind of the top representative at Payrock for for the sales that you individually make, in addition to you're managing this enormous team of salespeople. Is that still correct?
That is correct, and I remain humble. I know where my blessings come from, but I am still number one. So that's my competitive nature. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
great. Well, Rich, the question I have for you today is a little more complex than what we normally cover because we're kind of covering more of the sales aspect. But I think what's happening is, and you alluded to this a few weeks ago, I think a lot of new representatives get into the industry and they're presented with, hey, there's dual pricing, there's this one terminal, and that's kind of it. But of course, there are these other pricing structures. We talk about, compliant surcharging, which I think Payrock calls reward pay, I believe. There's, dual pricing, consumer choice. There's also Interchange Plus. There's tiered pricing, flat rate. So talk a little bit about pricing structures. How do you approach this? How do you pick the right one for the merchant? And maybe give a little context of, like, as you're making sales, what percentage are going kind of these different directions?
Yeah, and that's going back to one of the videos we did prior. That's a nice thing with the way we teach everybody and the way we train everybody is you have three different programs and whatever software or different types of equipment that you're using. And we actually have a sheet that breaks it down of exactly what the programs are, of a cheat sheet. And we do
Sure.
reward pay, which is a reward pay is the 3% charge on credit. Typically we'll do like 1.25%, 25 cents on debit, where the merchant pays, and 3%. Then we'll add a little bit more for the customer on that, maybe 0.5% more. So that's a 100% compliant surcharge program, which is almost available in 47, 48 states. I know there's a couple states that are not allowing it. And then, of course, you have consumer choice, which has evolved. When I first came in, it was like, to me, it was like, wow, it was very weird in the beginning, and I had a little trouble selling it. But once it got out, people were doing it. I was against it in the beginning. But then as soon as I started writing them, I was like, yeah, this is great. It's a moneymaker. But the problem is Visa has jumped all over that. And now that whole surcharging on credit and debit. So I'm thankful that Payrock has jumped on board beforehand. And we have a compliant surcharge program, cash discount program, I should say, which we use the Clover products with that. And there's apps that you can do that with the credit and the cash price. So we teach that. Typically, like when I first came into the business, we did tiered pricing. Now, a lot of representatives, they're like, what is that?
Yeah, I know.
So we did qualified, mid-qualified, non-qualified.
Right.
And honestly, I still do that once in a while. And I find that that's good for someone that has Square, because they're on a two-tiered system. 2.6, 10 cents. They're on a 3.5, 15 cents. So I've been in some businesses and I say, here's the issue with that. When you're using Square, it's simple. It's, everybody signs up with them because they feel that's the easiest one. But we've been converting everybody to this program because the reality in your type of business is you're getting a lot of debit cards. And what we've done with the debit card is we do that at 1.25 or 1.5, however you want to do it. So you got some flexibility there. So you can literally knock off 1.5% off every transaction that you're using. And then if you're getting a credit card, it's 1.75. And then if you're keying them in, it's 2.5 as opposed to 3.5. So when you explain that to a merchant on a tiered level, the numbers don't lie. It shows that they're saving money. But I'll do that once in a while. The easiest one is to do cost plus. And what you want to do is find out, because the bottom line is what is the bottom line that they're paying? What's the money that's coming out of their account right now? Now, if you run across a merchant and they're doing, let's say, 20,000 a month, and they're with this company that's just nailing them, and they're paying, 1,200 a month or whatever it might be, right? Now, the typical representative is going to say, I'm going to bring it down to 0.10 and 5 cents over cost. It's like, what are you doing? You can put them at 0.1% and 10 cents over cost, and they're going to save them a ton of money compared to where they're at. So you've got flexibility. You don't want to give the whole store away. You want to make money along with it. So it's important to learn as a new representative about how credit card processing works. What does interchange mean? What does assessments mean? If somebody comes to you and you walk into a business and they say, here, James, here's my statement. How much can you save me? It would be nice to be able to look at it and say, oh, yeah, in fact, the majority of the people that I'm helping, they have this program right here. Here's what we're going to do. This is what you're paying. Bang, bang, bang. We're going to knock it off. Here's your processing fees. We're going to lower it here. Bang, bang, bang. See, now you're letting the merchant know that hey, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Right.
And you just assume the sale from that point. So it's important to know those different programs. And again, you're going to keep improving, keep your attitude going, because that's the main thing. Always have a good, positive attitude. Never give up. You're going to improve. The only way you're going to get worse at this, if you develop the killer disease of success called negativitis, and you don't want to get that.
I love it. Yeah, it's interesting. I think too, a lot of the agents, if they'll just latch on to even just one or two kind of common things that they see on statements. I remember when I first started going out, I could identify some things like, regulated debit. I figured out, oh, that was on most statements, said something about
Yes.
that. So I would go, now right here, this is your regulated debit. And I talked about, because that was right after the Durbin Amendment came out, right?
Yes, yes,
And so I would
yes.
explain what that was. And that was like, and they would be like amazed. That was literally the only thing I understood on the entire statement. But I would say that was my one thing, and then I would send the statement off to get analyzed, right? So I think for new representatives, just keep learning, and then talk about those things and make sure that you're sharing valuable information. So, Rich, I love this. I always enjoy our conversations. For those who want to reach out to you, learn more about working with you and your team, and see if they're a good fit, where would you send them to learn more?
Absolutely. Just one point on that, because regulated debit, great point, because you can find some of these statements that will pad the interchange.
Oh, absolutely.
I always go right to 0.05 and 22 cents. So you got to know what that is.
Yep.
But if you see 0.75 and 28 cents, now you know that they're paying 0.70 over the cost. So a little side note for you. I'm throwing that in at no extra cost. But you can reach me at 904-434-4635. Reach out to me, text me, or you can email me at payrockrich.norton, P-A-Y-R-O-C, richnorton@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you.
So, James, the battle lines are firming up over that Illinois law. I believe I mentioned it here a few weeks back, that would exempt sales tax and tips from interchange assessments. And it looks to me that we could have a major battle with implications, for banks, processors, and others really, really lining up here. On the one side are the banking trade groups, the ETA, and even the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is the U.S. Treasury agency that regulates national banks like B of A and Chase.
Right.
On the other side are various merchant groups and Senator Richard Durbin, who want the government to rein in interchange.
Right.
So we're talking here about the Interchange Fee Prohibition Act. It's an Illinois law set to take effect on July 1, 2025. It would prohibit interchange assessments on the tax amounts or gratuities associated with the sale of goods or services. It also prohibits banks and others involved in electronic transactions, except merchants, from transferring or using data from transactions, except to process those transactions as required by law, which can have some real implications for, fraud, managing fraud, seeing patterns and so forth. Now, the banking trade groups have challenged the pending law in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. If allowed to become effective, it says the IFPA would upend the intricate and carefully calibrated global system for debit and credit card purchases. Now, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, of course, is siding with the banks, and it says that it would upend the balance between national and state law. That these are nationally chartered banks and state laws can't intervene. Noting that interchange fees compensate card issuing banks for the costs and risks associated for processing card payments, it's vital to the modern economy to have interchange, the groups argue. Furthermore, payment transaction data is critical to a multitude of banking functions, including fraud detection, reconciliation, know your customer, money other money laundering compliance, dispute management, even card rewards. The trade groups and the OCC assert that the law is preempted by any number of federal laws, including the Durbin Amendment, which gave the Fed authority to regulate debit card. Well, that's not so, according to Richard Durbin, senior senator from Illinois and author, of course, of the Durbin Amendment. he filed a brief with the court siding with the retailers. He said the IFPA aligns with the Durbin Amendment's text, structure, and purpose. And he added that it is, quote, both consistent with the Durbin Amendment and consistent with sound policy that will help protect merchants and consumers from excessive and anti-competitive fees. And here's the real thing, though, James. Illinois isn't the only state looking hard at interchange. Your home state of Pennsylvania has also taken steps to enact a similar law. Legislation has been approved by a committee of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and is now pending in the Pennsylvania Senate.
Really, I didn't even know about that. It's like a similar thing, meaning as far as the sales tax and stuff.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that's
now I gotta reach out to some people.
That's what I was just going to say. You need to be reaching out to your state representatives because, and that's the thing. I think this is the kind of law that can kind of like sneak in there in different states.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to be, even Illinois, I don't think a lot of people were really aware of it until it landed on the governor's desk.
Right.
And, then it has, and when you think about an implementation date of July 1st, 2025, that doesn't give anybody any chance to.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Well, maybe I'll get an update on the Pennsylvania side. I know all the people there, so I'll reach out, and I had no idea, so I have to look into that now. But maybe we'll get an update on the Pennsylvania side and things of that nature. But yeah, it really is. Again, I think the idea of are U.S. merchants paying too much in interchange? Probably. Is there some kind of collusion type of a environment, or with duopoly between Visa and MasterCard? To some extent, yes. So we agree on all of that, but then the question is what should be done about it? And so far, the proposals, both from Dick Durbin and from now these state legislatures, have just been frankly ridiculous and inoperable, and
they're piecemeal. I mean, it's a piecemeal approach that's never going to work.
Right. So yeah, well, definitely keep us up to date on these, and I'll be interested to see if even more states start jumping on the bandwagon, and we'll have to kind of take a look at this. If 2 or 3 more larger states go into this, then it's going to go to the federal, government. It's going to go to the congressional branch and see what happens. Yeah. So, well, thank you, Patty, for this info. Appreciate it.